welcome back, everyone. There was podcasts last week, but welcome back. Unfortunately, if you're listening to this and you're sitting at your desk at work, sorry to remind you that we're all back to work. Some people may not be, but for the most part, I think a lot of people probably had like a 4 to 5 day holiday because 4th of July being on that Thursday, people probably took off that Friday. They travel 4th of July, then they got Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday. Now we're back. I don't know. We're in that point in the summer where the news cycle, like luckily we do have this summer, we do have Euros, we do have Copa America, we do have the Olympics coming up, Olympic basketball. I think they've started their training camp for the Olympics, which the Olympics is like at the end of the month. So, I'm not sure when the WNBA is going to go on their break because obviously the NBA they're not in season, so most of the players from what I saw are in Vegas, which is where they're having their training camp for the Olympics, which is great. So from a card perspective, we are also in an interesting point where I don't know. Again, I think there's a lot of people who are going to be on social media, and you're gonna see. I feel like sometimes within social media and within cards as well, it feels like we can't, I don't know, maybe this isn't correct, but it feels like if we like one thing, we have to then not like the other thing. I don't know. It seems like that's kind of the case on social media at times where, especially within social media, I don't even think necessarily this is a Topps versus Panini thing. I think overall this is like just in general, I think if we like something, that it doesn't have to mean this, but some of the times, if we like something, that means we have to not like something, and that doesn't have to be the case. I'm here to, I don't know. I don't think that has to be the case. So if you're seeing it on social media, just know it's cool. It's not that big of a deal. Whatever. So we are at the point where Topps Chrome is going to come out. Topps announced the buyback program, going to happen again. Phenomenal concept. Love. I have been a big advocate for this concept since they came out with it. I really like that they are they're sort of giving value in a way to cards that maybe wouldn't have value. And like I've said, within sports cards, I do like the ecosystem, the self-reliant ecosystem within cards where you can buy and sell stuff and then that can fund. So if you have some of these MVP cards that will be in Topps Chrome, which also we don't know who MVP is. So this is, we knew we knew of the buyback program, but they hadn't announced it. They're announcing it like pretty soon, and Topps Chrome isn't out, so we don't know who is going to be the MVP. I actually would like them to extend this, and I would think a Cy Young, which would be good. Which unfortunately, I do think that there could be an MVP who is also the Cy Young. I don't know if last year, I don't think Ohtani won Cy Young. I know he won MVP. I think it was Acuna and Ohtani. This year, I think there's a decent race for who could win potentially here. And within Topps Chrome, this also means we are going to be getting a year 2 of the Topps, the 1-of-1 rookie debut patch cards, which the other piece of news that happened kind of late last week that I didn't really cover on the podcast was that that $150,000 bounty that David Adams put out for their to get the 1-of-1 Volpe card, that had, they came out with a whole YouTube video and that was accepted. I am wondering, I think there's two things that I think are, I don't know, I'm confused about how the bounty, David Adams, for example, they have done a phenomenal job with putting out bounties and then putting out the content that they're paying the bounties, because, if you go back to a couple years ago, that was just a thing that people did. They put out bounties, they put out their content, and they said, we're going to pay whatever $250,000 for the 1-of-1 Zion, or whatever the amount of bounties that were put out. There were a ton of them, which I thought it was a cool headline. Obviously, always a cool headline, but I don't think, I don't know. I would be interested to see if any of them really were actually paid out. Like, David Adams has done this a couple times. I think they did it with the one of one Babe Ruth Superfractor. And then I think there was one other card. I forget what it was, but I know they've done it a couple times. But they put out this video. They paid it out. Now, what I think David Adams probably does with this is they probably get it graded, they probably sell it, but I think it's twofold here for them, which I think it's smart. It's a smart marketing tactic. I think it is, I think it's actually a smarter marketing tactic than people maybe potentially realize, and I don't know if this is actually what they're doing. This is what I would, if I were in their position, this is what I would do. You have the card, first of all, but you can also now sell the card. And the $150,000 that you spent on the card itself, because they're making content around it, this is probably something they can write off in taxes, like for marketing expenses. Like, I would imagine it would make, I think that would be possible. Or there's got to be some sort of thing where they can do this. Or if they sell the card, they can write off the, I don't know, whatever. If they grade it and sell the card and it doesn't sell for 150, like let's just say it sells for 100, they could write off the 50,000 in taxes, which again, they're not getting the 50,000 back necessarily, but the 50,000 in taxes is probably decent enough for them to buy this card, put out the bounty, put out all the content, because like I said, it's twofold. They get all the publicity from the content, which I also don't think necessarily nowadays the bounty content is as popular, because I think, like I just said, we have seen a lot of people put out bounties and then we just never hear from the card being pulled. We never hear from any of the stuff, which I don't know. The thing that I find interesting about the Volpe card is, like, it was pulled so late in the cycle that it does make me wonder, and this is maybe a conspiracy, it does make me wonder if Topps is knowingly not putting certain cards into the market, and they are not flooding the market with cards, because these are one of ones, and I'm sure there isn't like one distribution cycle for a product like Topps Chrome. I'm sure there's multiple distribution cycles. I don't know if Topps is maybe, if hypothetically, let's just say, if you have to, I guess there's no way to prove this. I was just going to say, if there's a way for Topps to try and get people, when they get the cards distributed, to, you can only open the boxes in a certain order. I don't think that's probably not the case, but either way, I mean, this year, the Ellie De La Cruz is going to be a massive. I wouldn't be surprised if that one has a similar bounty, when it comes out, or when the design of the card, which I think that's another interesting piece that we haven't seen just yet. We know that the patches are on the cards, but we have not seen what the cards are actually going to look like, which I would be okay with them using the same design, because that's what Upper Deck has done with their exquisite cards for multiple years. And I know that some people feel like using the same design can be lazy, or they might not like it. But in my opinion, I think it adds to the mystique of the actual product and the actual card itself. So I would be okay with them using the same design, or at least the same concept design, like maybe making some tweaks. But I think year to year, if this card had the same style, that would be the decision that I would be making if I were Topps, to brand this and brand it as the card to pull. And I know that they have, like in the past, they did redemptions, which I still think that they should probably be doing the redemptions, because they want these cards to grade well. Like, they are going to, their cards in certain packs, like I believe this card was pulled out of a pack, which means that it was in a breaker product, but the other cards that are in packs that are, I don't know if you can pull it in retail, but either in hobby or retail, or like I just said, I don't know if you can pull it in retail, but if you can pull it from there, it was a redemption, which I'm okay with. Because they're making the card available to a collector who doesn't have, thousands of dollars to spend on product. Now, obviously, it's probably hard for someone to pull that card because it's a one of one and it's pretty rare, but I think the fact they're putting it in Topps Chrome was probably one of the best decisions they could have made for that card, because realistically, they could have easily put this into some sort of like Topps Dynasty or Tier 1 or some sort of high-end product, and I don't think people really would have complained. I think it's a card that is... It is a new concept. It's a new concept that I really like, but I don't think that people... I think people were expecting them to put in. Maybe people probably would have complained, but I think people were expecting them to put the card into a high-end product, which in that concept, you would have been able to pull all the cards, and it kind of would have been probably maybe a little bit cooler, but at the same time, Topps Fanatics, they want these cards if you're going to get them graded to grade high, so they want to have the ability to send you the card in the best condition, rather than... they are putting cards in packs, but rather than putting them in, a blaster or putting them in a hobby box, and then, like I've said in the past, hobby boxes put the cases, and then, the boxes, or all of it gets open, and the quality of cards, I just think, goes down the more that, more boxes and more packs you're putting into things, and the more you have to move things around. Obviously, the difference in quality. So we have, in probably the next few weeks, we're going to start to see the design, I hope. Maybe we'll start to see who is going to be the MVP for this year. But Topps Chrome, I think Topps and Fanatics have done a good job, and I think potentially they are trying to make this the premier product for them, which I think would be very smart. A Chrome product, the same way that Prism became a Chrome staple within the hobby. Topps Chrome already is, but I think growing that product only is going to help Topps and Fanatics in the long run, and in the historical perspective of a lot of people within this industry. There was a very unfortunate story that happened this past weekend at the Dallas Card Show. There were some big cards that were stolen from somebody who was there. And I don't know. It really is unfortunate that this is... I'm pretty confident that these people will get caught, because there's footage. There's no way that these cards can get sold. Like, as soon as one of these cards gets set up, and this is kind of part of the discussion that I'm going to have on this podcast today. So, Mascot, which is a company that basically you can like log your collection and stuff like that and track. I think it's a really really good app. It's Ezra, who worked with Collectible for quite some time, started Mascot, and I think like I said, I've met with Ezra many times, and I did work with Collectible, and he's obviously such a great guy and stuff like that. And he has this company, which I think is I like that we're this is one of the pieces I've talked about. Digitalizing the physical collectible space, I think, is very important, and that's something that I guess you can do on Mascot. Like, you can log all of the PSA certification numbers and all of these things, but I think I will be very interested to know if these cards, I don't know what these people expect to do with these cards. Like, they stole some pretty high profile cards. Like, I believe there were some 52 Manals that were stolen. So it's like, these people that, they're like, oh, we're going to steal these cards. It's like, come on, guys. You think that there's no way. Like, if there's one thing that collectively, I think, obviously, the industry comes together on, it's when there's stolen merchandise and trying to find the people who did it. And I think that the concept of the digital collectibles, or not really digital collectibles, but physical collectibles being logged digitally, I think PSA and other companies, I think, are going to start to double down on these concepts and be able to track specific certification numbers on cards. Because I think that it's a secondary way that these cards are going to be tracked, and that you will be able to hopefully tell, like, if a certain certification number, for example, sells multiple times on eBay for around the same price, and it continuously is sold, like, there's probably a chance that whoever is trying to sell that card is either shill bidding the card, or there's something sketchy going on. And that comes with the certification number from PSA being used more more frequently, I think, and more predominantly when it comes to card sales in general. Now, I don't know. I think PSA. I hope that they do this. I don't know if they'll do this, but I think PSA should, especially now that they have been working with the marketplace and working with the Golden and eBay and all of these places. Like, the certification numbers, I just don't understand why they haven't become more integral. I don't know if that's the word. I think you maybe know the word. More predominant. I think that's maybe the word I'm looking for. In the industry of buying and selling. To track, and I think maybe it could be that people don't want to track some of these because they are seeing some of the values go down. So that's one reason why they might not want to track it. But I think that also, I don't know. I think that also makes it's an important resource for people who are buying and selling specific cards. Like, if a card is sold and they have the certification number, it feels like that should be logged within PSA, within eBay, within the Golden database, and you should be able to look at that card. And the same way that Card Ladder, you can search any card on there. You should be able to search for the sales of any PSA certification number. And if I were PSA, I would try and make this more important. Because I think the more data we can get, the more transparency we can get within the sports card industry, the more legitimate it's going to be. I think that we have gone through some legitimacy. We've gone through some delegitimacy over the past few years, kind of up and down within the industry. And one thing that I think has helped and will continue to help is going to be the transparency and the continued attempts from companies to grow their businesses ethically and with transparency. Now, whether that's buying and selling specific cards and being able to track those specific cards, I think that would be one way. I hope that, in this scenario, and I think from these cards that were stolen, if this technology, because this is a new technology now, if you're into NFTs, for example, this isn't necessarily new. This is sort of, you can check any NFT that sells within, if it's OpenSea or if it's whatever blockchain that it's on, whether it's Solana or if it's Ethereum or whatever, you can see where that is going and who is buying and selling it. And I think it does lead to some transparency. It also can lead to people getting caught doing some nefarious things, which I just think that is something that we need to try and get away from, and we need to try and help collectors and people stay away from stuff, because it's somebody who maybe is buying one of these cards, if, I don't know, and there's no way to really track it, I guess, if you were doing an in-person sale. But if somebody is trying to sell these cards on eBay or through any auction house, there should be a way that if you are, PSA should even, and the same, I think Top should do this with breakers in a way where there are certain rules that breakers have to follow. There should be certain rules that PSA should enforce. If you were trying to sell a PSA card, your card certification number has to be registered with PSA, and you have to say that you're selling that card. Now, obviously, things can get a little sketchy when you're doing things in person, but I think any legitimate dealer will look at that and say, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, there's no reason for me not to do it. So it's eventually, maybe we'll get to a point where 10% of cards maybe can be found within the sales database. I don't think, unfortunately, we'll be able to get to a point where it's all of the cards because of, how many cards there are. We won't be able to do it the same way that they do it with NFTs, where it's the technology for this with NFTs was built into the inception of the concept. So there won't be a way for us to do it, to do all the cards. But I do think that PSA, for example, should I don't know if they would. I don't know. I'm not sure if they would actually be able to do this, but I feel like I wish that they would look into it and maybe there's potential for it. But to go to the big auction houses, to go to Golden, to go to any of these places and say, if you want to sell PSA cards, which, like I said, I don't know if PSA would legally maybe be allowed to do this, but I think I would like the idea. They would say, if we want to allow you to sell PSA cards, you have to register the card you are selling into the PSA database, and you have to log that there is a card being sold. And I don't know, maybe it's like everybody gets some sort of, I don't know, like an account, I guess, with PSA or something along these lines. Like, I just think being able to track the sales of these individual PSA certifications is something that maybe is going to be hard, but I think something that would add transparency to the industry, which, I don't know, overall, I think that's one thing that a lot of people look at and they say, well, those are some reasons why we may not see the legitimacy of this industry taking off as quickly as we maybe should. But I think adding as much background information on a card that is being sold in the long run is a good idea.
All right, so what we wanted to look at today and to start the morning is, do accolades, winning an MVP award, a Rookie of the Year, being named to an All-Star team, do they affect card prices and how much? And so I thought we'd deep dive a little bit into some of the All-Star game rosters and Rookie of the Year rosters and see if we can identify maybe potential buys, sells, and come across some rules for buying baseball players mid-season. First thing I always look at are the Rookie of the Year odds. This is a good time of year when you've got players separating themselves, like a Paul Skeens, who's the first player ever to play in an All-Star game 1 year after being drafted. So, I mean, he looks like a runaway Rookie of the Year favorite in the National League. And using some odds I found online, his odds for National League Rookie of the Year are minus 350, which are pretty favorable to him. Second is Jackson Merrill of the Padres, the outfielder, at plus 320, and then it drops all the way to plus 2,000 on Shota Imanyanga on the Cubs and Michael Busch on the Cubs at plus 3,800. The National League is tough this year. Paul Skeens is throwing it off. Typically, we don't want to invest in pitchers. The return usually doesn't hold up. The injuries are so much more. But the American League, I have a little bit of a different perspective. The American League, I think, has some opportunities. Now, to win Rookie of the Year, you don't have to play the whole season. So that's something to consider. Is some of these players did not start the year on the Major League roster, have not even played maybe April or May in the Major League roster. But coming on now and putting together some numbers, there's some players entering the conversation whose cards could certainly be affected by winning Rookie of the Year. Right now in the American League, the favorites for Rookie of the Year are Wyatt Langford, the Rangers outfielder, at plus 135, and Luis Gil of the Yankees starting pitcher at plus 195. If we discount Gil based upon our pitcher theory, and discount Wyatt Langford just because his odds at plus 135. If you're betting on this, it would be pretty even, almost even money. And it's a hard thing to predict Rookie of the Year at this point with his numbers. But if you're looking to invest into cards, there are some guys, let's say Ceddanne Rafaela of the Red Sox, Heston Kjerstad of the Orioles, Brooks Lee of the Twins. These are guys with longer odds and when I say longer odds, it also means the price of their cards can be more reasonable if the public doesn't expect the player to succeed or to win Rookie of the Year. But if they do, it can be a huge turnaround. So those were a couple of the names in the Rookie of the Year, and I'll read them again. Ceddanne Rafaela, Brooks Lee, Heston Kjerstad. All guys I think worth looking at to take a flyer on, maybe a Bowman first. Chrome Auto or something like that if you're inclined to prospect. Now, if you want to look at, and that's for Rookie of the Year. All-Star games were also announced this week. The American League starters were Adley Rutschman, Vladimir Guerrero, Jose Altuve, Jose Ramirez, Gunnar Henderson, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Stephen Kwan, and Yordan Alvarez. In the National League, the starters are William Contreras, Bryce Harper, Ketel Marte, Alec Boehm, Trey Turner, Christian Yelich, Jurickson Profar. And by the way, good for Jurickson Profar after all these years to get his first All-Star team. Fernando Tatis Jr. and Shohei Ohtani. When we talk about accolades and what they do to a player's career, it can do different things for different players. Gunnar Henderson making his first All-Star team certainly solidifies what people think about him, but he's also been mentioned in the MVP conversation. Making an All-Star team probably doesn't do much to his value when he's looking at MVP. Aaron Judge, same thing. Another All-Star team or the first All-Star team doesn't make a big difference. But what about a guy like a Stephen Kwan, who's a little bit under the radar in Cleveland, hitting over 350, starting in the All-Star game in the outfield with Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, really catapults him, to another level in the public's mind. So when you look at guys whose cards, if they have a good All-Star game, could take a bump, you have to look at those mid-tier veterans. Very little rookies, I think, are going to get a huge bump, very few first-time All-Stars are going to get a huge bump in the All-Star game, unless they're a younger prospect or a bounce-back prospect. If you want to look at some of the backup outfielders in the American League, Jarren Duran, Riley Green, two guys who could help their value. But I don't know that a Bobby Witt Jr. Has much more in an All-Star game that he could do, which leads to the conversation of the home run derby. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be in it. Gunnar Henderson, Pete Alonso, Marcelo Ozuna, and a couple more that are going to be named. And does winning the home run derby enhance the value? I would say it does not help Pete Alonso anymore to win the home run derby. That does not help his card prices. But what if a Gunnar Henderson or a Bobby Witt Jr. wins the home run derby? Does that help their prices, at least in the short term? I think it definitely could. And I think a lot of times these accolades and winning different awards and being named to different teams is something that we overlook a little bit in the hobby. You want players that aren't just stars, but when you talk about voting for an All-Star team, it reflects the public sentiment a lot of times for the starters, and that's why I'm talking mostly starters. It's who the public wants to see in the game. And if you look at the economics of buying and selling, you want buyers for your prices to go up. So if there's more people who believe a player and a card is going to go up in value, or is a good card and a good player, then that will have an effect on the market and have an impact that can drive up prices. So those are just some thoughts I had with the All-Star games being named. Some Rookie of the Year odds, a little bit past mid-season here, and starting to look to the MVP races. Not far off at all. The Topps MVP buyback program is a huge success last year, and looking forward to that being a success again this year. Once again, tying the hobby in with some accolades actually that'll be voted on. So very interesting, something to keep an eye on. I hope I've done Adam proud. I hope he feels better. He's a little under the weather, and we're certainly thinking of him. And I can tell you, I appreciate what he does every morning. And if you don't listen regularly, the Morning Minute podcast, hosted by Adam Palmer, Monday through Friday. Today, I am Danny Black filling in. And that is your Morning Minute for Wednesday, July 10th, 2024.
So first, want to give a shout out on short notice. Danny covered yesterday's podcast, so I want to give him a shout out and say thank you. Thank you to Danny for that. And the news that we're going to cover on today's podcast is going to be a new Topps initiative that was announced for the National. So it basically has to do with redemptions. So you can exchange your redemptions for what they're calling exchange boxes. And they're saying that the exchange boxes range from $50 to $7,500, which I don't know. It was weird because then they said plus at the end of that. So I don't know. Maybe there are redemptions that would be worth more. I mean, I don't know. The whole interesting thing is I don't know how they're determining value, I guess, on these cards and boxes, because essentially you can only participate in this if you have a redemption that's older than 100 days. Or what did it say exactly? It said a redemption that's been open for more than 100 days, which I guess maybe reading that out loud, I don't. Maybe there isn't a difference. Maybe like if you've got a redemption, let's just say from like, I don't know, Topps Chrome from this year, that's, they probably won't take that. But the other thing that I think is, I don't know. I'm not sure how exactly they're going to do it. I mean, I'm sure they have the data on this, but they are essentially giving value to these previous redemptions, which I don't really understand that, if I'm going to be honest, because like if some of, I guess, I don't know, if some of the cards are, I don't know how they're pulling the value. I don't know. If some of the cards have been redeemed and the cards have sold, then I guess you could pull value, but it's like, but then why are these other cards not been opened or not been there? I don't know exactly, but so essentially you have to trade in $100 worth of a redemption to get one of these boxes. So, again, the $100, and they're saying that there are some that could be worth $50, so you'd be losing. I don't know. I think it should probably, I do wish it was more just like whatever the value is what you could potentially get. Like that's just, I get that it's exchanging something that doesn't exist for something that does exist. But at the same time, I don't know. The fact that some collectors are going to lose $50 potentially, which I guess in theory you're not losing anything. You're not losing $50 because you would have zero if you just have these redemptions that are open. But so those are kind of the two big pieces of this that I would be interested to know from Topps how they're valuing these, and then like what like the checklist looks like, because I mean this is just again kind of going back to the PSA vending machine. This is just like a glorified mystery pack you're getting, which you are, you're redeeming autographs that are old, which I'm hoping that, well, actually, I guess that they did say that they were retroactively changing the redemption dates going back, I think 5 years, I believe. So like this might mean that, I guess it'd be interesting because, like, cards, for example, I feel like that would then mean the Luis Robert first Bowman autos, I believe that those were redemptions. So, like, I don't know. I wonder if they would be, like, if you're a collector or if you're somebody who has one of those, I guess I would wonder if, from that perspective, would you be willing to gamble? Because that's essentially what you're doing here. If you're not, you know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like that episode of Family Guy where they're like, do you want the boat or do you want the mystery box? It could be anything. It could even be a boat. And everyone, they do it for everyone in the neighborhood and everyone gets a boat. And then Peter picks the mystery box and ends up being like a $25 gift card or something somewhere. So I wonder if it would be like that. You could get this Luis Robert autograph, or you could get this mystery box that could be a Luis Roberts autograph. Again, that's sort of a meme, and I actually is. I feel like that in sometimes it is kind of what the sports card industry is like in a way. So you can only redeem 10 of these. So essentially you can only if you have $1,000 worth of redemptions, which I don't know who would have $1,000 worth of redemptions. 10 boxes are the maximum for this product. And then what are some of the other things? So they said it would be for $100. So they're saying like if you have, which I thought it was very interesting that they kind of laid this out, like they said, like, if you have $199 worth of redemptions, you're only going to get one box, but if you have $200, you'd get two boxes. Which, if you, at that point, just go out and buy another redemption. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know where Topps is getting the value from. This is kind of my biggest thing that I'm wondering. I think that they clearly have the data, but I wish that they would come out and say, give us a little bit more information on, like, how they're determining what redemptions are worth what. Like, if players have these redemptions, like, it is also very smart. I think that this is a way that Topps is getting some of these old redemptions off of the market, like off of the potential to have any of these redemptions, because, if a redemption, for example, is over 100 days, like, I think that maybe they look at it. I'm sure the 100 days is probably a statistic that says, well, if it's over 100 days, the chances that the player ends up sending in the cards or ends up getting the redemptions fulfilled, probably low. I think also, on the other hand here too, that if they can get, like, hypothetically, say that there are, I don't know, say that there are 10 random redemptions, like there's one player. Or I don't know exactly how you would do it, but there's maybe, like, let's just say there's one player that has a bunch of redemptions, and if they get these redemptions, or they have a bunch of unfulfilled redemptions, if Topps can get a bunch of people to give them their redemption cards, they can then go to the player and say, hey, I know we had 99 cards, but now, I don't think I don't know. I don't think that you would get it down this low, but now they could say, well, now all you have to do is 50. So if you sign these 50, they can get the redemptions fulfilled. Also, they could just say, we're just going to cancel the redemption and we're not going to keep badgering the player, because they're not, well, I don't know. Badgering is maybe a bad word, because they're contractually obligated to sign these redemptions, and it's one of the big issues with me with redemptions. And I've done many an episode on my issue with redemptions and how I think that they're kind of a scam. But Topps, one of the things that Michael Rubin has said in a lot of interviews, has been that they're going to try and fix the problem with redemptions. And I feel like they have done a bunch of different things to try and fix, whether it's, extending the dates on older redemptions that could have potentially been expired, or, they're doing a redemption exchange program where they're going to get some of these redemptions and people are going to get cards in their hands, which that's also kind of a big thing too. Instead of, you send in your redemption or whatever, and then you wait to get their autograph, you are going to be able to bring these redemptions and get an autograph on the spot. I think that is also a big deal, and I think doing it at the National is very smart. I think if they were to extend this to, I don't know, the Dallas card show, I mean, I'm sure they're going to do this at, the NYC show that they're going to be doing. Like, this just seems like something that they should be, they need to continue to come up with these, I would call them, creative ways to get rid of redemptions, or to get rid of, old redemptions. Because, like I said, they probably have the data that says 100. If a redemption or a player hasn't signed within 100 days, there's like a 20. Or after 100 days, it goes from like 50% chance to get the redemption down to like 20%. So using that 100 days statistic is probably something that they have looked at and said based on all the statistics, because if nothing, Fanatics, they have a lot of data. So they have customer data, they have some of these, they have some of this info, and I think that they're going to continue to collect more info as we go on throughout the sports card industry, or at least through their journey within the industry. So I think that they've done a fine job. And I don't include the one-of-one patch cards in this redemption conversation, because those are fulfilled. Like, for example, there was an issue with, like, Joe Burrow sent in his Contenders autographs like a week late, so they couldn't get them into the product. But if you open up Contenders from 2019, 20, no, it would have been, I guess it would have been, no, 2020 or 2021? No, 2020, I think. Whatever year he was a rookie, I forget off the top of my head. You can send those in, and all the autographs are live. So, Topps, this is just another step, I think, in the right direction for them to get autograph, or get get redemptions out of collectors' hands and then get the actual cards and get actual autographs in exchange into people's hands for the unfulfilled redemptions. On today's episode, I mean, we're going to be talking about one sort of topic. I have a couple different thoughts on the topic. So, Sports Card Investor, the Sports Card Investor platform, whatever, they put out using some gem rate data, what were the most recent cards that were graded, or what cards were graded the most in the past 7 days. So this was probably like a day or two ago. So the content, it's probably different now, but I think that it gets more into a bigger conversation, I think, because if you look at this, if you look at the graphic, it is Wembanyama Prism, Wembanyama Select, Wembanyama Prism Monopoly, which that's I don't know, something about that is so weird to me, that like Prism Monopoly is like so popular, like I don't know. And then there's Connor Bedard, number 5, Upper Deck, Anthony Edwards, Prism, number 6, CJ Stroud, Prism, Jackson Holiday, Tops Now. I wonder, there was a misspelling there, so maybe that's supposed to be just regular Tops. I'm not 100% sure. And then Ellie De La Cruz. And then the whole point of the post was like the number 10. You're supposed to guess what number 10 was. I don't know what it was, but the two pieces that I think are interesting here are, one, I think potentially people are maybe underestimating what is going to happen when Fanatics and Topps take over the NBA license, because it's the middle of the summer. And, sure, baseball is really the only sport going on. Obviously, sort of. With soccer, there's some soccer, and then there's Olympic basketball. But I just think that within a off season, the number one player from last season, the number one rookie, is still one of the highest, or the highest, from the top 3, the highest graded cards from PSA. So I think people are maybe potentially underestimating what actually is going to happen when Fanatics takes over that basketball license, and like the I don't know, the growth that they're potentially going to have when they start actually making these licensed products. I think, too, the other point here is that I think something here that I find interesting is that sports cards are so they're so prospect-based that, like, we went through a couple years where basketball, there wasn't a lot of great prospects. There were a couple pretty good ones, but Wembanyama, the last prospect that was as big as Wembanyama was Zion. And we saw what happened when Zion came in the league. I mean, which also, that was COVID, so it's a little bit different. But I think the hype behind those two players, even if you were to take COVID out of it, very similar. And I just think that cards and I don't know, maybe this will be a cycle. Maybe we could potentially spot cycles here if you are, if you're a buyer and seller, or if you're somebody who is looking to buy cards that are lower in price, maybe when there's a season when there isn't a great prospect, maybe people don't care as much about cards and some of the value gets lost. But then you have a prospect like Wembanyama come around and rookie of the year, phenomenal, played super well. Sure, played on the team that was one of the not worst team. I don't know. I guess worst team in the league. I don't know if I want to call them worst teams in the league, but maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But still, they had a top pick within this year's draft, so they weren't good. But I think if you were to look back at basketball before the Wembanyama year, the prospects weren't that good. The prospects were okay. They're kind of still figuring it out. I mean, obviously in 2020, you had Anthony Edwards, which it's interesting to look back at the retrospectively looking back at that draft and how excited people were for LaMelo Ball, and then he doesn't go first overall, and then Anthony Edwards does, and Anthony Edwards is like, he's probably one of the next faces of the league, realistically. I mean, he has the personality. He's playing on the Timberwolves, which is a they're going to be probably a title contender for a couple years here. Now, I don't think that they're going to be a one-and-done sort of thing. Like, the Mavericks, I don't know. Also, I just look at it and maybe I'm a little bit biased here as a Celtics fan, but I don't know. I just think the Celtics could go on a bit of a Warriors run here with winning a bunch of championships, just because they are doing exactly what the Warriors did. Like, whether you want to say they got lucky in the draft or that they drafted and were able to develop these players well, and then they were able to get more players and have them sign contract extensions and go under the bird rights and go over the luxury tax to keep all these players, the Celtics are going to have the same team for the next 3 or 4 years. So barring injuries, I think it's going to be really tough for any team to really compete with the Celtics. So I don't know, maybe Anthony Edwards, maybe they make it to the finals and they play the Celtics, or I don't know, maybe, the Warriors did lose in the finals one year to LeBron, so maybe there's a chance that could happen as well. But I think overall within cards, I don't know if I guess it maybe is a cycle, and maybe somebody who is more analytically focused could look at it and say, well, maybe there are points here where this happened, points here where that happened, stuff along these lines, because the fact that Wembanyama, like Prism and Select, also is very interesting, and could just be the product of the time, could potentially also have something to do with this list. But the fact that Prism and then Prism Monopoly are still so highly graded, I think Wembanyama probably will show that, I don't know, I don't think Panini has slowed down their production at all. I would say there's probably a really good chance that they maybe not necessarily increase, but they kept steady with what they did. Because if you look at Luka, you look at Zion, you look at probably Anthony Edwards, you look at, I don't know, Pablo Banchero or Chet Holmgren, or players that have been rookies that have sort of molded into more established stars here. Wembanyama hopefully turns into one of those players also. But if he continues to play at such a high level, that we're going to see what happened last year in terms of how many of these cards were graded. And I think now, honestly, we also have gotten to a point where PSA has made grading cards pretty affordable again. And I think that they've tried streamlining the process so that way people can just do it. You can go, PSA goes to places and you can drop cards off. You can sign up for, which I don't know, and off the top of my head, I guess I'm not sure if there was a PSA subscription that you could get that you could grade cards yourself. For example, at the National last year, I just graded a bunch of cards. Sure, I dropped them off at PSA, but I graded them myself. And, I would almost say it was probably a little bit of a blessing in disguise, looking back in retrospect to what happened with PSA shutting down submissions right before the LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards Prism product releasing, because the amount of cards that probably would have been graded for LaMelo Ball is I don't know, I'd say it's got to be 3 or 4x what the numbers we have now, if you had been able to open those packs and get those cards graded right away. And like I said, we've gone back to PSA being an affordable option to get cards graded. And they have, like I said, they made it more accessible, in my opinion. They've brought the prices down pretty significantly, and, you're not waiting a year to get these cards graded anymore. I went through Card Vault when I went to the Fenway Card Show, and I got some cards graded through them. I mean, I probably could have made a trip out to the Dallas Card Show or one of the other card shows where PSA was, but I was like, I don't know. It wasn't something that was in the cards, for no pun intended, for that. And like I said, I'm still trying to figure out if I can get out to the National this year in Chicago. I think the closer we get, because it's next week, which is insane, No, 2 weeks. It's in 2 weeks, sorry. The weekend of the 27th is that weekend. So, next week I'll probably do some shows talking about it. I don't know. I know I want to try and get out there one of the days and get some cards graded, if I'm going to be honest, because I have some stuff that I've been holding on for a while that I've been looking to get graded. And then probably, I don't know if I have to renew my PSA membership also. I probably have to do that. But the Wembanyama's, that's probably another reason why they're still getting graded so frequently, because things are easier, they're cheaper, which I guess, it's good. I mean, I think PSA has done something very interestingly. They have not necessarily cornered the market for grading, but they really have. They've done something that I feel like a lot of brands really struggle with, is they have become the industry leader in grading. I feel like they maybe always were, but they really solidified themselves as that industry leader. And they decreased their prices, but they didn't decrease the value of their brand, which I think I think Panini has done sort of the opposite with that, if I'm going to be honest, over the past few years. They've made cards easier to get, but they also have charged more for them. You can get them, but you're going to have to pay Panini more, you're going to have to pay Walmart or whoever more. But it just feels like their brand overall has really suffered for, a multitude of different reasons. And I'm not really going to get into on this show, but I just think that, like I said, the contrast, it's maybe not a one-to-one comparison, but I think what PSA has done, that, like I said, I think a lot of brands struggle to do this. A lot of companies struggle. They want to get the products into people's hands, but they haven't cheapened the experience of a PSA card, and they have increased their brand power, I think, over the past few years. While, like I said, other companies within this industry, in my opinion, have done the opposite.